Hello and welcome to AFcast. I'm your host Malcolm, and today I'm going to be talking about what we know about the second division so far. And for those of you who don't know, the second division isn't out yet, but the first division is. So if you guys want to play that, then go right ahead. I find it was an absolutely amazing game, and we definitely recommend it to anyone. Anyway, let's get right into it. So Ubisoft's main focus for the second division was or is the end game. So it's not it's basically what that means is that their primary focus isn't the campaign. It's going to be what's going to happen after the campaign and after you've gone through all of those levels and everything like that. So basically, after you reach the top level and after you've completed all the story missions and everything like that, there is going to be extra things that you're going to be able to do, just like the first division. But that's going to be their primary focus is after all of that happens. Anyway, so the next division is also going to be a one-to-one scale of DC, which I find very interesting because I don't know of any other game that has done that. I don't know if any other game has done that, but so it's definitely a really cool feat. And so yeah, so I find that very interesting because a lot of games, what they'll do, they'll go to the place, they'll take pictures, and then they'll recreate the world. But they're never really one-to-one scale of that place. So like another one of Ubisoft's titles, Ghost Recon Wildlands, they actually went to Bolivia. They like took a bunch of pictures. They recorded some areas and did everything, and they did a lot of like geography, pretty much exactly the same and everything like that. But they did add a bunch of extra stuff or change some things, or like stuff wasn't the same scale as it was in real life. And so one-to-one scale map is just a very interesting thing that you don't see it in a lot of games or at all. Like I said earlier, I don't know if this is the first one or if not. Either way, it is very cool. And also, if you played the first division, then you know of the base of operations or Boo, and you also know of Isaac. And both of those are going to be in the second division. So if you liked either of those things, then they will be there. I really hope that the BOO stays mostly the same. I hope it doesn't change entirely, like the way it's structured and the way it works. I'll talk about that in a little bit later. Yeah. There's also going to be like little civilizations where they have like gardens on rooftops and everything like that around the world, and you can get like side missions from these. And so, along with that, there's also going to be more kids and also elderly people. At least I believe so, from what I could see from gameplay and like cinematic trailers for the game. Because you didn't really see that much in the first division. You mostly just saw like middle-aged people. Because although it makes sense that middle-aged people would have survived better than like kids or elderly people in like a post-traumatic setting or post-apocalyptic setting. Like there still needs to be some, or at least be able to recognize there are some without having to like go look for them. Like oh hey, that's a kid, because you never saw kids or elderly people just walking around the streets of Manhattan, but you did see a bunch of middle-aged people. So I think it would be interesting if they haven't already added that in the second division to do that, and if they already have it, then sweet. There's also some things to interact with. At least one thing. There's the Christmas tree and the gameplay trailer that you can actually turn on. And I really hope that there are other stuff like that, just like little Easter eggs that you can press a button and something will happen. Especially with it being Christmas and all when the disease hit. So there's all of these leftover lights and stuff. So it'd be really cool if it was even just like the same thing over and over again for each button, like lights or something. But it was like in different areas. So it was like maybe a darker area and you pressed a button, a bunch of Christmas lights would pop up. I think that would be a very cool thing to add into the game. And then along with that, there's also going to be control points. So control points, from what I've seen at least, are only at plane crashes. I don't know if it will be only at plane crashes, but the two that I've seen have been at plane crashes, and essentially the enemy has taken over these control points and they're holding them. And I don't know why they are control points. I don't know if it's for supplies or something like that. But essentially, what you do, you can take it over, and civilians will end up defending it after you take it over from the enemy. And the enemy can actually take it back from the civilians, and the civilians can actually take it back for themselves or by themselves also. So that's very interesting, especially since like a lot of AIs are like that are on your team at least are pretty terrible when it comes to combat. So I hope that these civilians are actually good at combat, and maybe there's just a few of them or something like that. Because it would make stuff a lot more fun, I guess, to be able to live this moment, I guess, like with other people and them trying to defend their homes while you're also helping them out as the professional division agents for the government. And then there's also going to be airdrops, which you'll find in like stuck in trees or the roofs of buildings or anything like that, kind of like hanging down from a parachute. And from what I've seen from the gameplay trailer, you can actually shoot these and a reward will come out of it and you can pick it up and use it just like anything else. And so I don't know if these are going to be only rare, like rarer things, or if they're going to be more standard equipment that you'll usually get from enemies and such, kind of like it was from the loot boxes that you can find in the first division around the map. And there's also going to be specialists instead of special abilities. So the special abilities in the first division, one of the links gave you a boost of healing, and then one of them gave you high resistance, and another one boosted your stats on your weapon. So yeah, so those were the main things that you could use in the first division. Now these are specialists, so these are a little bit different. So like these, instead of having abilities, they have weapons that they use. So there's a sharpshooter, which their weapon is a 50 cal sniper rifle that you can use against the enemies. And then for the demolitionists, they have a grenade launcher that they can use. And then a survivalist has a crossbow that can shoot explosive bolts at enemies. There's also going to be some new skills that were released. There is the Hive, which is like small drones launched into the air, and they cause devastating effects on enemies. And they're usually used defensively, but when they are on offense, it is considered a Wasp Hive instead of just Hive. And then there's also an assault drone, which is an unmanned drone that can be actually controlled remotely. And, it just also causes devastating effects on your enemies. There's also Chem Launcher, which shoots various chemicals that will disperse upon impact. And you can have stuff like where if you shoot through it, then the cloud of chemicals will light on fire. You can have another one where they have repairing nanobots, which will like repair your armor. And they're also doing, I believe that they're doing, I heard this from a friend and not from an actual source online. But apparently the Seeker Mines will also have a new mod where if you throw it, instead of just placing it on the ground, it'll act as an impact nade instead of just like a regular frag grenade or a regular Seeker Mine. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. There's also going to be something that I don't know if they'll make into a skill, but it is definitely something that the enemy has, or at least one of the enemies has, which is actually a new faction called the True Sons. And what this is, it's an archetype that has these special glue traps that they shoot onto the ground, and what they do, they kind of build up this foam around your ankles, and you can't move when this is happening. And from what I know, when you're playing multiplayer, the other people will shoot the glue or whatever it is and get it off you. But if you're playing single player, I don't know if you were to like press melee over and over again in order to get this off of you. I don't know how you would do that. So there's also going to be a new way that health works. So it's kind of going to be the same thing as the enemies that you have. So instead of having your 3 bars of health that you usually do in the first division, you will have 1 bar of health, and you'll also have armor instead of just your health. So in this case, instead of having med kits in the game, you'll actually have armor repair kits that will repair your armor. But I'm pretty sure that your health is permanent until you're out of combat, and then it'll regenerate. So I don't know that entirely for sure, but that's what I believe it is. And also for the specialists, instead of having, this kind of goes along with the specialist is what I'm trying to say. But essentially, like, so you usually have the regular grenade wheel in the first division, and instead of the regular grenade wheel in the second division, instead you're going to have a choice between a few different grenade types for each specialist. So like sharpshooter might have a flashbang or a tear gas grenade, and I believe all of them have frag grenade. That they're all able to choose frag grenades as their like main grenade. But also the thing that's interesting about this is that like in the division you had to go and you had to search for all of these, like, I don't know, like the different like flashbangs and tear gas grenades and all of that. You had to actually physically search for them, or you had to wait until the enemy dropped them or something like that. But for this, if you select it as your primary grenade type, then you're actually able to restock it, which helps people like me, because I really like to use the flashbangs and shock grenades a lot in the first division. And then along with that, there's also going to be a new weapon mod system. So instead of just getting weapon mods, I don't know if this goes for gear mods as well. I've only heard this for weapon mods, but instead of like picking them up from enemies and having them take up your storage, they actually don't take up your storage, and you also don't pick them up from enemies. Instead, you unlock them by level. As you level up, and you're able to have an infinite number of them, so you're able to put the same attachment on all 3 of your guns if you want to, or you can have a separate one for each gun. And yeah, the thing that I really like about that is that it doesn't take up any storage, because before I have like in the first division I have multiple loadouts in the game, and so essentially each loadout has different weapons, or at least weapon mods, and so I have about like 20-30 mods that I carry with me at all time, taking up a bunch of space in my inventory, which sucks, because not only do I have to carry all the weapons and the gear and everything like that in order to switch between the different loadouts, I have to carry all the mods, and there are a lot of mods that I use within 5 loadouts. So yeah. There's also going to be a different gear brands, so if you played the first division and you got to the end game, then you might know about gear sets, which essentially are sets of armor that you can put on, and for every amount, so like if you had 2 of the gear set on you, then you get a certain special ability. If you had 3 on you, then you got another one that added on to the second one, and then you keep going. Until 4, and then so now what they're going to do, they're going to be doing the same thing, except for it's going to be for every level of armor that you can get in the game, except for until you get into late game gear set stuff. So you'll just so beforehand, when you have like common to high end stuff, you'll just be able to have not necessarily bad, but they're going to be worse, and they're not going to be as good, but they still give you some effects, just like the gear sets. But in this case, they're called gear brands. And then I don't know if they're going to work like gear sets, or if they're going to work like classified sets. And if you don't know the difference between that, gear sets only went up to 4 at a time. Classified sets went up to 6 at a time, which was the max amount that you could get. So I don't know if they're going to act like classified sets or if they're going to act like gear sets, but that is cool either way, so I'm fine with it. And also, a thing that I'm really happy about is that enemies are going to be less of bullet sponges. So everybody's main complaint about the first division, I shouldn't say everybody, but I'm pretty sure it's everybody, is that all the all the enemies are just big bullet sponges. Like you'll have 5 enemies that are like a really high level, and they'll take forever to take down each, unless you have a really good weapon. And because they just soak in all of the bullets, and they can just stand there and shoot you while they're taking in everything, and you usually have and they usually do a lot more damage to you than you do to them, like in a ratio type of sense. So it's kind of annoying. I mean, at least they can't revive and stuff, which is good. But now, instead of enemies being less of bullet sponges, I'm going to guess that they're just going to increase the number of enemies that they're going to have, so that way they can still keep the amount of damage output and input that the enemies can do, just spread between different enemies. That way, it's not like there's 3 enemies compacted into one. So instead of there being like 5 against you, there might be 10 against you, but they all will have less health and they'll all do less damage, which is fairly nice because sometimes you'll have like one person flank you, like you'll have one person run behind you and start shooting you, and sometimes they'll have so much health and they'll be doing so much damage and you're already low health that they'll just demolish you, and it's really annoying and it sucks. So I'm glad that that's going to happen. And then there's also going to be, in the new factions, there's going to be new archetypes. So essentially these archetypes are going to, so if you don't know what an archetype is, first of all, it's essentially like classifications of enemies. So if you ever played the first division, you would see that there was like a little arrow above one of the people's heads, or there was a cross above another, or if you saw like a little scope symbol, or if you saw like a bullet symbol, anything like that. Each one of those individual like symbols that you saw above enemies' heads, those were the different archetypes. So like the ones with the arrows would be considered assaults. The one with 2 arrows would be commanders. And then the ones that had the bullet above them would be tanks or something like that. And so those are the different archetypes. Another thing that I'm not entirely sure that they're adding in yet, because I don't think they have physically said it, but I'm pretty sure that you can see it in the gameplay that they do for the bigger enemies that are supposed to have more health. I think you're able to like shoot off pieces of armor, because like you saw this big juggernaut looking person in one of the gameplay trailers, and they had this like really thick armor plating on them, and I believe the character that you were watching actually shot off the knee cap cover thing, whatever it's called, a knee pad, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm pretty sure he shot that armor plating off that went over his knee and actually kneecapped him, because the person actually fell to the ground like on their other knee. So I'm kind of wondering if enemies and their armor actually can like react to where you shoot them and how. So like if you kneecapped the enemy like the one person did, maybe they like fall to the ground, and it takes them a second to get back up. And 1, that makes a lot of sense, and 2, that offers for a lot of new strategies, because in the first division, they did weapon balancing perfectly. Like, weapon balance was really great. At least in my opinion, it was. Because usually a lot of games, they usually have one type of weapon that is pretty bad to use in combat. So, like, maybe in one game, it's like SMGs are bad, or in another shotguns are bad, and another snipers are bad. Stuff like that. And so I think what this allows even more stability in that whole gun department type situation. So like if you like to use shotguns, then in the Division 2 you might be able to use a shotgun and kneecap someone and then like shoot them in the head or something like that, since shotguns do more damage at close range. It offers a lot of new strategies, and once again, I'm not entirely sure if that's actually being added into the game, but it is definitely a very interesting thought to think of. Or at least for future games, it's an interesting thought to think of. Another thing that you hear from the trailer that they released at E3 was enemies come from within. So at the end of the trailer, they said they're talking about the apocalypse and how it was hard to encounter, and then at the end they said, and I quote, especially when the enemies come from within. And that is kind of what like really caught my attention right before they went into the gameplay trailer. Like, because the entire gameplay trailer, I was just thinking about that one line. Now, they could be talking about Aaron Keener from the First Division, since he was a Division agent that went rogue. So that could be what they're talking about from enemies come from within. And there's also some leaked stuff about the leader of True Sons being a former JTF officer, and if that's the case, and that can also what it means. But it can also have an entirely different meaning, like someone from the government or something allowed for this scientist to make this advanced virus that pretty much destroyed the human race. So yeah, it could go one of two ways, or probably one of many different ways, because it is a very interesting thing to think about, at least for me, because you can take that in so many different ways. It allows a lot of opportunities for Ubisoft, mostly great opportunities for Ubisoft. So I really want to see what that's about. Yeah. And then also the last thing is that they announced that their first 3 DLCs for the Second Division are going to be free. And so, although it doesn't really matter right now because we're probably not going to learn about them anytime soon, because it does come out March 15th, it's still amazing, because all they had was 3 DLCs for the First Division, and I got all of them. They were all amazing. But they said the first 3, which is definitely, at least how I take it, grammatically correct for a situation where they'll have more than just 3 DLCs. And the thing is that if the first 3 DLCs are free, then I wonder how many they'll actually come out with. Like, I don't know if they're going to say, like, the first 3 are free and then we're coming out with another one that, like, kind of wraps it all up, or if they're saying the first 3 because there's going to be a lot of them, which kind of can concern me, because then they'll kind of become like companies like EA, where they'll be like, oh, you can only really have fun with my game if you put a lot of money into it. And so I think that's one reason why I'm also happy about first 3 free DLCs, but I hope they don't come out with a bunch of other DLCs that would primarily make the game fun and make you want to buy those. So, yeah, so that's my take on it. So yeah, so that's a little bit about that's what we know so far, at least that's what I know about the Second Division so far. And so a lot of different stuff has come out for it, so I'm sure I've missed something, because, I mean, this is a really big game that people are looking forward to, including me and my friends, because the Division is definitely one of my top, like, 3 or 5 favorite games of all time. Anyway, so I'm going to talk now a little bit about the First Division if you have never played it before. So instead of DC, you are placed in Manhattan. And I do believe that these are separate times. I'm pretty sure that the Second Division will take place after the First Division, but at the same time, it could also just be that it takes place at the exact same time. I don't entirely know. So yeah, so it's placed in Manhattan instead of DC, and the sad thing is that it's actually not the entirety of Manhattan. It's just a small portion of it. But it still feels pretty big, though, since all you can do is really walk around or run around. There's no real, like, fast way to get around, but, like, by ground or air or anything like that. The only fast way to get around is by fast travel. And for me, I don't really like to fast travel that much, because I do like looking at open world games like this. So, like, I never fast travel in games like Ghost Recon or Just Cause or anything like that, because it's just fun for me to fly around or drive around or anything like that. and see what I can get into. And also, according to Ubisoft and other things that I saw, the game actually broke company records and also just records in general. So they broke both the company records and they also broke other records for like when it came out and how many buys they got. And it's one of Ubisoft's most popular games, or at least at the time it was. And I don't know if they still have these. I don't know if the First Division still holds these records at all. Um, but it's definitely cool that they did, and so that brings a lot of hope towards the Second Division. And so the thing that kind of sucks for Ubisoft is that they kind of had to live up to that. So yeah, it's also just the game is just pretty much just amazing. I mean, it's a I I don't want to say it's a beautiful game because it's post-apocalyptic in a city, so it's not exactly beautiful, but it's not beautiful in the sense that it's rainbows and like colorful streets and everything like that. But the artwork itself is really beautiful and it's really amazing, and it's very well done for the game, and it really makes you feel like you're in the correct place for how the game story goes, which doesn't always happen in these type of post-apocalyptic games. Yeah, so there's also 4 factions in total, technically 5 if you want to get into specifics. But the 4 main ones are rioters, cleaners, Rikers, and LMB. So rioters are kind of just street thugs that, just go around busting into people's houses and taking TVs, even though it doesn't matter anymore because it's post-apocalyptic world. And then there's also the cleaners, which try to burn anything that has been contaminated at all whatsoever. There's the Rikers, which are named because they all escaped from Rikers prison. So they made a organization for themselves, and they strike different JTF outposts or LMB outposts, anything like that. And then the LMB is essentially a paramilitary organization. I'm pretty sure it was developed before the apocalypse happened, but then it definitely jumped up after the apocalypse happened because their company mainly survived and the people in it, and they were able to recruit more people and also get a bunch of guns and stuff that was left behind, building up their organization. And they actually ended up getting a bunch of agents from the division, from the first wave of agents, and they actually got them to go rogue and be part of their organization. And that's another thing that I was going to say, is that the person that you play is not from the first wave of agents. They're actually from the second wave of agents, which essentially means that they already had sent out a group and they failed in stopping the threat, so they've sent you and the rest of the second wave out. So yeah, and the fifth faction that you could call a faction, I guess, is actually what, their lore is that they are the third wave of the division, except for instead of them trying to stop the threats like cleaners or Rikers or LMB, they are trying to stop you because the government essentially sent out their division because they are afraid that you're also going to go rogue for the LMB or even just on your own, and so they try to kill you before you could do that. And that's one reason why they collect your watches, at least according to the lore, that's why. So that way nobody can see who you are and see your identity, because if you look on the map, you can actually find missing agent profiles, and what you do, you find their watches, and you can get the profile off of that. And so what the hunters do, is what they're called, is they'll take your watch so that way nobody can identify you as a division agent. And then also it has amazing replayability, and it has an amazing endgame. And with that, there's also DLCs. So there's Survival, Last Stand, and Underground. I forget what order they came out in, but essentially the Underground is it's basically the same thing as like it's kind of like a strike from Destiny. If you've ever played Destiny, there's these strikes that essentially allow you to go after like an HVT, which means high value target. And so it's basically the same thing where you get sent into the subways and maintenance tunnels underneath of New York, and you have an objective that you would do, like kill an HVT or like activate generators or take out or like do a surgical strike of like the LMB, so like take out some head people or something like that. Um, and so that's what the underground is. Survival is essentially you get dropped into a highly contaminated area of New York during a blizzard, and you actually cut because you're wearing a hazmat suit and you're going into there in general, but your helicopter starts to crash, and when you fall out, you get cut, and so the cut causes you to get infected, and you have to survive this harsh blizzard and also get back home within an hour or you'll die. Now, you do get some stuff that allows you to postpone the infection, but it is really fun to play because it's very high stress, especially when you get down to lower amount of time of your actual survival. And then you also can't survive outside very long unless you get better clothing. So you're also hunting for supplies to get clothing. And then you're also hunting for supplies in order to make like a flare gun to call a chopper. So it's all of these, like, it's basically a very high risk. Yeah, it's really high risk, and it's fun to play. It kind of sucks though when you're playing like an hour of it, when you've played like an hour of it, and then you die to like to hunters actually, because hunters can come out and kill you in survival. Actually, this is where all the hunters are. They're in survival. They're in the underground, and then they're also in West Side Piers, which is another end game thing that you don't need a DLC for in the First Division, where essentially you get to go to these different areas. Like, so one of them is a carrier, another one is a giant like shipping dock. Another one, one of them's a pier, one of them's a carrier, and then another one is, I'm not entirely sure what it is. It's called Powerhouse. So I'm guessing it's some kind of, it's probably like the control center or something for the pier of Manhattan right there. But essentially what you do, you just have waves coming after you over and over again, and every fifth wave is a boss wave. And different things can occur, like sometimes the entire area will get flooded with contamination, and so you'll actually slowly die until the end of the round after you killed all the enemies, and then you'll be able to get your health back. And yeah, so that also gets very interesting. Anyway, back to the DLCs. The last one is Last Stand. And what that is essentially a team deathmatch of a group of division agents versus another group of division agents. And the thing is that the matchmaking is very unfair for this. So it's not great, but it's still really fun to do. You have to activate different like hard points on the map. It's essentially a game of domination. So there's A, B, and C. So A and C are your home team's one, and then B is in the middle. And you can capture any of the objectives, and as you hold the objectives, they'll actually slowly climb. Your team will slowly climb in points until you reach a certain threshold that will get you the win. And so yeah, so it's basically just a giant PvP thing. And another PvP thing, which is actually the last thing I have to talk about the First Division. It's not a DLC. I already talked about the 3 DLCs: Survival, Underground, and Last Stand. But it's called the Dark Zone. And so what this is, so basically the place that you're usually playing in, like for the campaign and side missions and all that, is considered the Light Zone. And then the Dark Zone is a walled off portion of Manhattan where they tried to contain the disease and failed. So essentially when you go in there, there's all of these different factions that have that have basically taken over the area and are roaming the place trying to kill you. And then there's a bunch of contaminated areas that you can go into. And there's also landmarks that you can take control of from the enemies that are basically like the control points that I talked about for the second division. Um, and you can also find other agents in there. And what can happen in the Dark Zone is that you can actually go rogue and kill other agents. Now, if you're on a team, then that'll make your whole team go rogue. So be aware that that's the case, and don't be a jerk and make your team go rogue if they don't want to. But basically, what you do, you take everything, all the loot that you get in the Dark Zone is considered infected. And so you have a separate storage where you keep infected stuff. And it's a pretty small storage, and so you have to extract every once in a while. You have to extract these items. And what can happen is another agent can come along and actually cut the rope and take all your items, and they'll actually become rogue if they're not rogue already. So it's another one of these high risk situations. The thing that kind of sucks is that after people playing the Division for so long, a lot of people are really good. So if you don't have a high level account with high damage weapons, then you're probably screwed until you can get really good gear, which kind of sucks, but it's true. And I actually do kind of hope that they have like what you can actually see from the gameplay. You can actually see a giant wall in DC. Now I'm not sure if that's like the same thing like they have the wall for in the First Division for the Dark Zone. So I'm kind of hoping they have a Dark Zone, because the Dark Zone is very fun to play in and do. So yeah, I hope they have another Dark Zone in the Second Division. Anyway, now I'm going to talk about the differences between the two games and like what I want there to like have changes in and what I want to keep. So stuff that I want to keep is I want to keep funny dialogue in the game, but I also want to have more of it, because what will happen is after I've played this game for a couple hundred, probably more than that, hours, a few hundred, several hundred, I don't know how many hours of the game, I've basically memorized every single piece of dialogue that they've said. Whereas other games like Ghost Recon, where I've played actually more of that, I'm still hearing new dialogue every once in a while that is either supposed to be hidden or it just wasn't noticeable right away, or you just kind of have to like wait for it and stuff like that. And the thing is that there's not much of that in the first division. It's mostly the same thing. Like the most common one that you hear, they actually made an achievement out of it. It's called "They Got Alex," because like every once in a while when you kill someone, the people would just yell, "They got Alex," and so it's kind of annoying because I mean, like I'm pretty sure half of your enemies aren't called Alex. So it's annoying to hear that all the time. There are a few other names that they say, but they mostly say Alex for some reason, or at least that's the most noticeable one. But yeah, it's become a giant meme essentially for the First Division. I also want to keep the same gear ranking. So what happened is it went common, standard, specialized, superior, high end, gear set, classified set, and then exotic. And when it gets to gear set, classified set, exotic, and high end, it kind of gets in a jumble for which one's better. It's mostly on your opinion. But yeah, I hope they keep the same consistent rate. I mean, I know they have gear brands, so they might change up some stuff. Like there might not be gear sets anymore, and just classified sets or something like that. But yeah, I definitely hope they keep exotics and gear sets, and I also want them to actually keep some of the same abilities that those exotics or gear sets had, but I also want them to add some new ones. I want more variety, because before there's only 14 gear sets that I can remember, and then there's about three of each type of weapon. So there's like 3 assault rifles, 3 some machine guns, 3 marksman rifles, 3 shotties, stuff like that. And so I don't necessarily want more exotic weapons, like type of weapons, but I do want more abilities that can come with them. Another thing that I want to keep is loadouts. So I use so there's a total of 5 loadout slots, or 6. Yeah, there's a total of 6 loadout slots that you can use in the first division. And I really like to have these different loadouts because they can go for different situations. Like in the underground, they have these things that you can activate for each operation that do different things. So like one of them essentially is that you can, after you shoot for amount of time, you will actually get shocked. But what can happen is that some of your bullets can have a shocking effect and actually shock the enemy as well. And so what my friend and I do, we have a support station, which is one of the skills, and we have a reclaimer gear set, which basically allows, which the ability for that gear set allows this healing station to have every possible mod attached to it at the same time. And so one of the mods for it basically makes all status effects go away. So what you can do is when you have that down, you can just constantly shoot and never get shocked, because every time that you have that shocking effect, this support station will get rid of it. So you'll never have any lapse whatsoever. You'll just be able to constantly spray like you usually do. But the thing is that sometimes, you won't have it, and so you do have to compensate for that. And another thing is that I want to keep the loot crate system with the encrypted keys that we have, and maybe get rid of the premium credits, or at least the things that you can only get with premium credits. Because I don't like the fact that there are certain customization things that I can't get because I have to buy them with physical money. That stuff kind of annoys me. I at least like that Ubisoft is staying true with only being allowed to buy customization stuff and not buying like weapons and like gear and stuff like that to put you ahead of everyone else. Cough cough EA. And yeah, so I also want to keep the BOO and its branch style system, where essentially you have the medical wing, the security wing, and the tech wing. I don't necessarily need it to be medical, security, and tech. Like, I'm fine if there's even like 5 wings and maybe one of them like can go like has double the stuff as the other 4. Or I don't know. Just I basically want that same branch system where you can choose what you want from each thing, and you can basically build all of it up from the ground up. And I did like how the BOO in the first division actually got cleaned up and stuff, and like looked prettier, and everything like that as you upgraded it. And I also want to keep the field data from the first division. So I don't necessarily need it to have like the exact same things. Like I don't need it to have survival guide in it again. Or I don't need it to have like the drones again. But I would like to keep like phone recordings in some way. Like maybe you can look at texts between people, or like you can look with all the crashed planes that are in DC that you can find. Maybe you can find in each of these planes, like you can pick something up from the intercom that was recorded or something like that. I don't know. And I definitely think that Echoes should stay, because I felt like that was a big part of the division, like creating the environmental scans with Isaac and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's all the stuff that I want to keep. Now I'm going to move on to the bigger stuff that I want changed, or other people want changed in the game. And the first one is pathfinding and targeting. So, in my opinion, the pathfinding and targeting is really bad. Not really bad, but it can get sketchy, especially when it gets to higher level people where they're supposed to be more aggressive. Because sometimes their targeting can be off, where I'll literally be right next to a rusher, which is essentially somebody who, rushes you. I don't know if that's their actual name. I think their actual names are berserkers, but my friend and I call them rushers because they rush us. So, but like I'll be standing right next to one and they haven't noticed me yet or something like that, and I'll start shooting them, and they'll run behind me and start shooting my other friend or one of my other friends. And I'm like, dude, I'm right next to you. What the heck? Like, I can understand people from the back or like snipers or something shooting people in the back, but like I don't understand when I'm standing right next to somebody and they don't feel threatened by me to shoot me. They try to shoot people behind me. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. And sometimes this targeting can also make them have weird pathfinding because sometimes they'll and I'm not entirely sure if this is on purpose or on accident. But essentially what happens is they'll like run behind you to take cover in order to like go after you. Like, and I'm pretty sure that they're not like being smart AIs with trying to get an angle on you from behind cover. I'm pretty sure they're just trying to find cover, and their pathfinding for some reason made them go towards the cover that got an angle behind yours. Because there's also another pathfinding technique that the LMB mostly do, where they'll like be suppressing you with gunfire, and then they'll slowly move behind your cover and start shooting you. That makes sense. But when somebody runs like all the way down there and past you and then takes cover behind you, that doesn't really make sense to me. Now, if it's on purpose, it looks very accidental. It doesn't look like it was done entirely professionally, in my opinion. It looks really sketchy, which makes me think that it is a glitch. So either that's a problem with me and my friends thinking that that's a glitch, or it's just the way it's, or it's just like not the way it's supposed to be. Either way, I want it fixed. So, yeah. And the reason I'm considering that a big thing is because like every single person can do it. Like every single enemy can do it. And so it's frustrating and it's annoying. And it happens quite often, and it can actually lead you to getting killed, like I mentioned earlier, with them being bullet sponges and them also dealing a lot of damage. And so another thing is PvP matchmaking in this game is pretty unfair. Now, it makes sense now because it's been like 2 years, like 2.5, 2 years, something like that, since the game has come out. So it makes sense that, you know, it's going to be a bit unfair because there's still new players coming into the game, especially with the second division coming out soon. But it's still set up in a really unfair manner where you're being set up like in Last Stand, you're being set up when you're like level 2 against level 99s. I know that they balance out the teams with each other, but the thing is that it's like teams of 10, which means that you'll have like level 70s and 80s on your team, or like level 99s, and then they'll have 70s and 80s just to make it like an average the same. But when you're level 2, that sucks because you're literally being caught. Like even if you get caught in the crossfire, you're going to be taken out pretty much instantly. And so you need to play the game a lot in order to be to their level. And that's really frustrating to do because then you have to put in a lot of time just to have fun. And like I said, it wasn't that way the entire time when the game first came out, and when the the DLCs first came out, everything was great. Like it was running pretty smoothly, but then after about a year, it actually pretty much half a year, it got pretty iffy and bad. Another thing is server versus client side. So essentially, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this here. So like my friend and I, we mostly play together rather than separate. And so a lot of the time it'll be like a lot of stuff happens at the same time for us because that is what server side is. Client side is when it happens to an individual person, so it's usually what they use for single player games. But server side is usually used in multiplayer like the Division. But the problem is, and this is actually a problem with a lot of Ubisoft's games, is that they have both server side and client side because they try to mix the two to be very like, so that way they flow well together. But the problem with that is that they also kind of like, they kind of interrupt each other. and they don't really make sense all the time, and it can cause problems that look like lag, and it's not your fault. It's the game's fault. Because there'll be times where I'll light someone up where they should be dead 3 times over, and they'll still be shooting there. They'll still be shooting me and kill me. And that's annoying because then 2 seconds later, they'll take all of the damage at the same time and get killed. And so that's a server side problem because my friend isn't shooting that person, which means that that person isn't taking damage according to the server, but your client side isn't really working, so you can't hit you can't hit them correctly, if that makes sense. It's the same thing. My friend always has medkit delay because I'm more tanky, so I don't always need medkits, but he needs medkits like all the time because he has very low health. But the problem is that every once in a while he'll get medkit delay, and I've gotten it a couple of times as well. But he'll press the button and then he'll die after he's already pressed the button like 3 times trying not to die. So it's just another frustrating thing that can be annoying. And then there's also map displaying, which can be like glitched, and so they won't like show up on the map immediately. And what will happen is this only happened once from my recollection, but my friend and I were heading towards our objective. And he was like, "What the heck are you doing?" Like he exclaimed that. And I'm like, I'm running towards the objective, and suddenly I was in the middle of an entire group of cleaners and they were all shooting at me. That was not fun. Like, because for his screen, he saw all the enemies there. He saw me run into a group of cleaners and stop dead center in the middle of all of them, and then they appeared on my screen. That's a problem. Or at least in my book it is. Another big thing is that stuff is really hard to keep track of at first when you play The Division. Like, at first, it's like you realize, oh, I keep forgetting to use all of these grenades in my grenade wheel. Or what I see is that people still have a problem with not using consumables during fights, which essentially give you different effects, like a healing effect or like extra damage toward a certain type of enemy, or anything like that. And it just doesn't work correctly because they don't know how to use it, even though it's really helpful and beneficial. And another thing is that like you don't really think about gear and weapon talents all the time until you actually realize it's there. And it's not really important either because a lot of the time you're switching your weapons out for better ones anyway. At least I am. So the weapon and gear talents don't matter all that much when you're constantly switching them out. And then also your character talents also get overlooked a lot, I believe. Like, I feel like after you set them up the first time around, you kind of don't pay attention to them for the rest of the game. And then another thing you don't really pay attention to, at least at first you don't. I feel like once you get into the end game, you start paying attention to this more often, but it's mods. Mostly gear mods because weapon mods seem to be put on a lot. But like a lot of the time you don't worry about buying better ones, or a lot of the time you kind of just leave them in your inventory and never switch them out for better ones because it's just because the mods are only slightly better most of the time. So it's like, what's the point of going through every weapon that I have and switching out these mods, especially for someone like me where I have a bunch of loadouts. So I have to go through like 50 items in total, switching out mods that only have 100%, not 100%, 100 point difference between the two of them for whatever it is. All right, so that was the, oh yeah, there's one more thing actually that I just remembered. So there's also the gear set and exotic special abilities. I feel like after you like kind of set up your gear set stuff the first time around, I feel like exotics are more paid attention to because they're rarer to get. But once you start getting a lot of gear sets, you kind of don't really think about changing what gear set you have to one that might better fit your playstyle. Like I really like using Firecrest, which essentially gives me a bunch of extra like damage, or like there's just different stuff. Like if I have three of gear set pieces of Firecrest, then a turret that spits out fire will have longer distance and also do more damage, stuff like that. And there's also a point where like if an enemy is on fire, then I can do a hell of a ton extra damage to them. But then after that, for a while, I just didn't really think about gear sets. But then after I started thinking more about other gear sets that I could put on, it was so much easier because then I was able to mix a couple of them by having like three Firecrest while having three final measures. That way I can diffuse grenades and also do extra damage to enemies that are set on fire. And so it's a thing that I feel like a lot of people overlook. Like I feel like after they have one gear set, they're kind of done. So yeah, so that's all of the big stuff that I want changed in the game, or other people want changed in the game, anything like that. So now I'm going to move on to some of the smaller stuff, which I'm not going to talk about as much as is like the bigger stuff, because there's not really as much to talk about. But like, if you've ever played The Division, you know that like a lot of the cover is pretty straight. Like it's not a lot of like circular cover or anything like that. So like it feels like you should be able to look at the side of your cover, like parallel to your cover, and be able to shoot someone that you can get an angle on based on that. But the thing that's frustrating is that anytime that you try to do that, you stand up for some reason. And I'm like, you don't need to stand up when you have an angle on them while you're still behind cover and can hide from everybody else while hitting this one person. And it only happens after you're about like 40, 50 degrees off of parallel to the cover that you'll actually go and sit back down behind the cover when you're shooting someone. So it's pretty annoying. Another one is direction showing. This isn't really a glitch. This is just poor mapping. Because sometimes it'll show like a little arrow above where you're supposed to go, so it leads you to where you're supposed to go. And the thing is that sometimes it runs you into a dead end, and then you have to go a couple more blocks in a direction, or you have to cut through a building in order to get to where you want to go, or it just doesn't, or it just like stops somewhere and it's like nowhere actually near your objective because you need to climb through a building and stuff like that, and it doesn't actually show you where it is. But sometimes it does go through a building and it shows you exactly where it is. I don't know. It's really weird, and it seems poorly mapped in my opinion. Once again, it's just my opinion, but I do hope they do that better for the next division. Like I hope it seemed like they did the mapping and then they built the city. Like I don't know. It was frustrating. And sometimes status effects just didn't appear on my above my character. I couldn't find anything for PC on this, but this does happen on consoles. And so, yeah, it's a bit frustrating because sometimes you're just taking random damage and it's from bleeding, but the bleeding status effect doesn't show up, and so you don't know what's happening to you. I mean, you can figure it out, but it's like it's not something that you can just look at immediately and see what's going on or how much time you have left of it. Another one is override selection. So essentially what override selection is when a new objective appears on the map, you can do an override selection by pressing another button to select that instead of the current objective that you have selected, or if you just don't have any things selected at all. Sometimes it doesn't work, and that's annoying. Like sometimes when you press the button, it just like the override selection disappears, but it doesn't actually select what you wanted. And sometimes it just selects it on its own, even when you don't press the button. So then it'll start leading you to another objective. Yeah, it's really weird and it's frustrating. And it kind of goes back to the whole direction showing thing. Anyway, another thing is that the JTF are really annoying. So what they can do essentially is they can actually push you. And that's annoying because if you're in your menu and they walk into you and they nudge you even like a fraction of a millimeter, then it'll put you out of your inventory, and then you have to go back into your inventory and like redo everything that you just did and didn't save. And that's annoying. And another thing that they'll do is that you'll be in cover, and then maybe somebody will start walking around your cover, and so you have to kind of like get up from your cover to get them really quickly, and then go back into your cover. Except for when you go back to your cover to be in that cover again, there's that JTF officer that was just standing next to your cover suddenly in your cover, and it's really frustrating. I've even had them push me out of my cover to take my cover sometimes. It's just annoying because then I can't get the angles that I want to get on the enemy with. So yeah, it can be frustrating. And another one is AoE melee. And if you don't know what AoE stands for, it stands for area of effect. And it's frustrating because what can happen is like so it's another thing with the rushers. So for the rioters and the cleaners, their rushers have melee weapons, and then for the Rikers and the LMB, they have shotguns for their rushers. Anyway, when the rioter or the cleaner rushers come after you, sometimes they'll have that weird targeting thing where they'll go towards the person in the back instead, and the other person might be standing slightly in front of you. And when the person goes to swing their like bat or axe, depends on which one it is, at you, and they hit you, they can also hit the person that's behind them, and that doesn't make sense because even if they're like nowhere in their swing radius that they actually show, their person will still get hit. And it's frustrating because I'm fine with it like if it has like a range like in front of them because of how much they swing, but it's annoying when you're nowhere in their swing and they still manage to hit you. Or like there's a weird glitch where if you roll, because you can like dive and roll out of the way in the Division, and it's annoying because you can actually dive and roll out of the way when they go to swing at you, but if you do it too late, after you've already rolled away, they can still hit you from like that distance that you've rolled away, which is about like a few feet, like a yard or something like that. And so it just doesn't make sense. It's just the melee is really stupid in this game. Anyway, another one is the warning cancel. It doesn't feel like there's any warning cancels in the game, and if you don't understand what I mean by warning cancel, it's kind of like the stuff that like stops you from doing something, and tells you a warning before you go and do something. And either these are really annoying because like if what you could do is every time that you deconstruct something, then you'll get supplies for it. But the thing that's annoying is that sometimes when you pick up a marksman rifle, it'll have a scope that's already on it. And so every time that you go to deconstruct a sniper rifle or sell a sniper rifle, it's like it tells you that, oh, there's a scope on this. Do you want to keep it? Like there's a scope on this. Are you sure that you want to sell it or deconstruct it? And it asks you that every single time, and it's so frustrating. And then there's other stuff that is more important than that, where it'll tell you in like a corner of the screen, and you only realize it when you're actually looking for it. And so it doesn't actually stop you from doing the action. It just kind of tells you in the corner of the screen in like small print that you're about to do something stupid, and that's annoying. It's really annoying. Because I never saw the warning there until one time I was getting frustrated and I was talking about it and I was showing my friend, and then I actually saw it. It was just in the most obscure place possible on the screen, and it was really frustrating. Yeah, anyway, so I also have some ideas for the next division. I'm guessing no one's actually going to listen to me, so but I'm still going to throw them out there anyway. But I mentioned the hunters earlier, with them being the third wave, or possibly being the third wave according to lore. But I would really like them to get like a backstory to them in the second division, like maybe just have like side missions or even main missions if you really wanna. That could even be what they mean for enemies from within, since they're hunting you. Another one is that I think it would be cool if like hunters could each have their own gear sets on them. And so essentially what happens is that they'll actually use the abilities from those gear sets. So like if they have D3 FNC, which is one of the gear sets that I like to use, it basically allows you to use a submachine gun with a riot shield instead of just a pistol. And so it'd be really cool to see a hunter doing that same thing instead of the typical like the average few that they have in the first division. Like it would be cool to see them actually using the same stuff as your division agent. And so it would also be cool to see them actually drop a piece, like maybe each one of them drops a piece of their gear set that they were using every time that you kill one of them. And then another thing is that I'm kind of hoping, like my friend and I that play the division, we're hoping that Aaron Keener comes back from the second division because we really liked the idea of Aaron Keener being the main bad guy, especially with how smart he is, or at least he acts like he's the smartest person in the room all the time. I don't know if he actually is, but he does seem like a very interesting foe in any game, really, because he's very elusive. So yeah, so I kind of hope that he's in the next division. So is my friend. I also think it would be cool when you do a cover to cover move that you can actually initiate reloading while you're doing that, because you can reload while you're doing it, but you can't initiate it. And so sometimes it kind of messes me up, like kind of messes up my flow. But that's just a little thing. Another one is I want single player and multiplayer to be separate, because although Ubisoft does like the flow, and I do like the flow, it messes up a lot with that server side and client side that I mentioned earlier. And so I think I would really like that, especially since sometimes when I'm playing single player, I have to complete an entire mission or get to a checkpoint where I'm not getting shot at in order to take a piss instead of just pausing the game. Like I just like to pause the game sometimes when I'm playing alone, because sometimes my parents also need me and I'm doing a very long mission with a friend, and so they're fine with that. They're fine with me like playing that mission out with my friends since I'm with them and doing this very elongated mission. But they do get frustrated when I'm playing single player and I can't do it because I have to do it on my own as well. So yeah, it's just it can get frustrating, for me at least, because I like to have that pausing ability because a lot of stuff goes down. Another thing is that I think the sidearms should have an ammo reserve. That's just a little thing I'm throwing in there. I don't think it should be infinite. It just doesn't make sense, and it kind of annoys me. That's just what I have to say. Another thing is that I do want some sort of transportation. And the reason for that is that it's kind of boring walking around Manhattan, just like walking or running or whatever it is. Because although I really like looking at the game, it feels really slow. So I think it would be cool if you could like whistle, or like you could actually like whistle or something in the game. It'll call over like a horse, because we do see a horse in one of the cinematic trailers. And so I think it would be amazing if you could actually ride those horses, and maybe even like use a pistol while you're on the horse, or have gear sets for riding a horse. It would be really interesting to see any sort of transportation, even like a broken down car that doesn't go fast but it can still move. Like, I don't know, just I want some other way to get around the map other than running my butt off. So, because I don't like fast traveling. I know I've already mentioned that, but I don't like it. I don't like fast traveling at all. Another thing is that I want actual boss fights. I don't want these bad boss fights that are in the first division. I mean, they're not necessarily bad, but all they really are is they feel like waves. Like, they don't necessarily feel like you're actually against a specific enemy. What feels like a boss fight is the last mission that you do in the game. You fight an Apache helicopter, and then there's also these things called incursions that happen at the end game, And in these things, you're going against, well, once again, an Apache helicopter. And then you're also going against a giant fire truck that is literally a fire truck. It shoots fire at you. like, and so those are actual boss fights to me. And then like another one is an APC that will shoot turrets at you, and you have to place bombs on the back of it and blow it up. Like it's those type of things that I want that I want to have in regular missions with boss fights. Like I don't want these boring boss fights where it's just a normal looking person with extra health. Like that's kind of dumb to me. But hey, that's just once again, it's just my opinion. Another thing is being able to hack tech, because the rogue agents can all do it. Why can't we? So, like maybe even they can make that a specialist, is just being able to hack the different tech things that enemies will have, and turn it against them. I think it would just be a cool thing to have. And then another one is I kind of wish you could shoot while you're mantling, because there's sometimes when you do cover to cover moves, and actually it's pretty much the whole cover to cover thing. I wish you could shoot while you're doing it, like hit fire while you're doing it, because it is annoying when you're doing cover to cover and like you need to do cover to cover because somebody's got you pinned down from a long range and you only have mid-range weapons and you need to get closer. But the problem with that is that you can't shoot to suppress while you're moving. So it's kind of frustrating, but it's also just a little thing, so it's not too bad. Another thing that's really annoying to me is penetration, because you can't penetrate anything in the first division. Like even a piece of cloth that the enemy is hiding behind, you cannot shoot it, and it doesn't make sense to me. Like why can't you shoot a bullet through cloth? Like I don't know. It's weird. And I wish they had some sort of penetration in the game. Like it doesn't obviously need to penetrate through like every single material, but it needs to at least penetrate through cloth. Like just makes sense to me. But I don't know. I think they should also have both males and females play parts for the different archetypes in the game, because before it was like all of the assaults were male. At least it seemed like it was mostly male, because it seemed like it was pretty much just all male. And so I wish they could like mix it up and have some female and some male in there, just to keep it like, even. And then another one that I want is, so if you don't know, there are commendations in the game, which they're basically in-game achievements that you can get, and they have categories and stuff like that. And one of the categories I kind of wish were specifically for skills, but that's just because I like to hunt for that type of stuff. So I think it would be cool to have a specific category that you can do commendations on. But yeah. Another thing is that I think it would be cool to be able to have a melee secondary. And so I think this would just be cool, because then you could like maybe even be able to counter like maybe these, because like in the first division the melee sucks in the game. Like, and it makes sense because of how like powerful these other people are. But I think it would be cool if like your melee could actually change how much it does based off of what melee weapon you have. Like maybe you actually have like a knife or like a bat or an axe or something like that you can use. Yeah, I don't know. And then I think there should also be like some ricochet in the game. Like you can see ricochet, but it doesn't actually do damage. And I think it'd be cool if you could do controlled ricochet like you can in Titanfall 2. As a special mod for your gun, you can like do ricochet. So maybe they can make that a weapon talent, where you can actually ricochet off of walls and hit people. So I think that would be cool. Another thing is that I think grenades, at least depending on the grenade, like frag grenades, I think should be able to hit weak points. Like maybe some of the fragments that come from the fragment grenade can actually hit the weak points and do some damage to it. And so yeah, so I would find that very interesting. So those are my ideas. Now to the term of the day, which is camping. And so essentially what camping is, one, I'm just surprised if you've never heard it before. I mean, you probably haven't heard it before if you don't play multiplayer, because it's mostly a multiplayer thing where you just kind of sit in a corner of a room, and whenever somebody walks into that room that's an enemy, you shoot them. And so it gives basically the enemy no time to react because they don't know you're sitting in a corner. It's different for stuff like, it's mostly in stuff like Call of Duty or Titanfall and stuff like that. But in Siege, it obviously makes sense if you've ever played Rainbow Six Siege, because that's pretty much all you do is camp. I mean, you can also roam, but I mean, you mostly camp in the game. Yeah, so that's it for today. Game on.